Welcome to Working Smarter, Concise Compliance Conversations featuring Wendy Rubis, sponsored by VillageMD, primary care physicians. Practice medicine the way you've always wanted. Data, resources, and clinical decision support to care for your patients inside and outside the exam room.
Hi, welcome to Working Smarter. I'm Wendy Rubis, General Counsel of VillageMD. Today, we're going back to basics, and we're repeating our theme of helping our listeners look smarter and get questions answered that maybe they're too embarrassed to ask. To do this, I'm so thrilled to have Amanda Burke. Amanda has a Master's of Science in Law from Northwestern University School of Law, which is just one of our favorite programs. She comes to us with a background in law. She's worked in healthcare as well. And Amanda, I'm so thrilled to have you in my department, and thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Wendy, for that introduction. I'm very excited to take part in the podcast today.
Thank you for joining me. And if I know one thing I love about Amanda is she tells me the truth and she will speak truthfully about what we're doing. So you've been such a great asset to our department. We're so glad to have you. And thanks for joining. So Amanda, coming into the legal risk compliance department at VillageMD, anything you've observed, any patterns or trends that you've seen?
Yes, actually, I feel that we get certain questions from people, and sometimes you can feel like you're too scared to ask these questions out loud. But we get certain questions over and over again, and I feel like it's a good opportunity to answer some of these questions for people, and so they feel more confident when they're going in meetings or other settings.
Yes, our mission is to help our workforce look and feel smarter. This is a question that I think we've been hearing with regard to COVID, okay? We have local Texas, let's say, for example, rules on masks. We have state rules. There's sometimes municipal or county rules. And then we, of course, have federal OSHA as well as CDC guidance. So the question is, what do I do when there's a federal and a state law on the same thing? What do you tell people?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people have those questions. Just the easiest thing to do is follow the guidance that is stricter. Go with that one first. And then there may be a preemption if we're going more specific with it. But if we're going to just keep it basic for the purposes of this podcast, just follow the strictest guidance out of all of the ones that you see or hear about.
So Amanda, what is that expression? It's like, don't do this or...
No, don't try this at home.
Right. Don't try preemption analysis at home.
Yeah. That's usually something a lawyer is going to have to take care of.
Right. But if you want an answer right now, just do the stricter thing. Okay. That's easy. Okay, Amanda, next question.
Well, actually, Wendy, I have a question for you, if that's okay.
Yes.
So what if I go to the doctor's office or anywhere and I am confused about something? So I do what most people do. I go on Google and I search for my answer. And then a guidance document comes up. Should I trust it, or, how do I even follow that document?
This is every professional today. I know our physicians get people in, we have the WebMD printouts of their condition, okay? And lawyers have this too, where people come and they have something off the internet, okay? And so the answer, should you trust it, is going to depend, of course, and that's why people love lawyers, because we always say it depends. But let's just take a minute and talk about what it is, okay? If it's law, that means it's a statute passed by a legislature, state or federal, or it's executive branch, that's regulations, and those we would consider law. And those we would obviously trust those unless they're out of date. So in our shop, we of course make sure that they're the most current, but those are trustable. Now, every executive aid branch produces all kinds of other things that are not regs. It's hard to publish regs. There's all these rules and how you have to do it and things. So they do put out lots of guidance. And actually over the last 4 years, we saw more of this sub-regulatory guidance than ever before in my career. Part of that was because of COVID. There just wasn't time. Part of it was an administrative kind of style where you were almost getting these memos and just other things. And it did get really hard to figure out is, can I trust this? Okay. But the sub-regulatory guidance, the answer to can you trust it is probably, but it depends. And it's worth just taking a second to go, the thing about law and acts is that they're slow and they're very general. Because they're slow, they can't be changed frequently. So they're very general. So they don't do a good job of answering your question. You're not going to really get the deets out of an act. Especially in health law, it's very hard. You'll do better if we can find the regs. They tend to have more detail, more information, more guidance. The sub-regulatory guidance, even though I told you it's not as reliable, that's the goods if you can get it, because it's usually it's like the Cliff Notes. It's like a cheat sheet. So lawyers working in my department, we don't just look at sub-regulatory. We start with act, then we go to reg. That's the order of precedence of legal research. But if you're just trying to get a quick answer to something and you do find sub-regulatory guidance, it's probably reliable unless it's out of date. And so it's a fair bet, as long as it's official and it came from that agency and it's not out of date, you can probably trust it. Sometimes, we look at court cases as well. And of course, they don't provide binding policy. What they do is answer a specific problem, but they give us holdings and guidelines and things that we can look at to determine how is something going to be applied if it's an enforcement or lawsuit situation in the future.
Wow, Wendy, that was a lot of information. That was good and useful. So to be sure, I understand the biggest thing you want us to know is make sure that the sub-regulatory guidance we find, which is probably going to be the easiest thing for the general public to understand, is up to date and accurate.
Yes.
Okay, great.
That can be tricky. So you might need a lawyer, but it should have a date on it and you should be able to tell that for the most part.
That's helpful. So then I have one more question I have to shoot back to you because you did the last one so amazing. The question is, what rules apply when it comes to our insurance, like our health insurance? And we know it's complicated, but it's still a question that everyone wants to understand.
This is such a complicated question. And it comes up, sometimes people will say, well, they'll say Medicare doesn't prohibit this, so it's okay, right? We recently had the opportunity to talk to Zeke Emanuel, which was so interesting. And he was one of the architects of the Affordable Care Act. And he talked about one of the regrets that he has. And in hindsight, looking at the system that we have, and he said, it's so complicated that, and we also just did a podcast on attribution and just talking about, to a consumer, do they even know, what their insurance is? And most of the time the answer is no. The rules that apply to your insurance are different if they're private. And even inside of private, the laws that apply are different. If it is self-insured, in which case we look at ERISA. And for the most part, the state insurance codes don't fully apply. Then if it's a fully insured plan, then we have a state insurance code and not ERISA, as well as the multiple other, of course, laws, whether that's HIPAA, whether that's, info blocking. I mean, there's many other sources of law, but the specific laws applying to your plan depend on whether it's fully insured or self-insured. Of course, if it's private. Of course, then if it's on the exchange, there's other rules and things that apply to exchange plans. If you're in a Medicare plan, the rules are going to depend on things that most Medicare beneficiaries probably can't even answer. Are you in a fee-for-service plan? Or are you in a Medicare Advantage? Most consumers don't know how to answer that, but the rules are very different, and even the coverage is different. And if you're in a fee-for-service plan, are you in an ACO? Are you in a DCE? And so the rules are going to be different. And so that's where it does start to get very complicated. And it takes, a lot of work just to kind of sort it all out and keep it straight. We've seen rapid change to these rules over the last 4 years. Rapid, fast change, the most of my lifetime ever in an administration. And already we're going to see some of that start to flip back around in the next 4 years. So as they say, watch this space, I guess. We're going to see a lot more change happening here. I guess it's worth saying that all of that is really just talking about sort of Medicare or your insurance. Amanda, this is something that I love to look at, this picture, and I really actually wish I could get a poster and just like look at this in my office because I'm just so fascinated by all of the different parts of CMS. Each one of these parts has laws, they have regs, many of them have grant programs, they have procedures, they have things that they're putting out. And so even just inside of CMS, it's much more. CMS could have a tagline, we're more than Medicare. There's a lot of other things that they're doing that we have to be mindful of as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a more complicated system than I think people are aware of, but they should know that.
So Amanda, thank you so much for everything you do for VillageMD. It's a good time to be a VillageMD, isn't it?
It's an amazing time.
And you've made such a contribution already in the time you've been here. So thankful to have you as part of the team, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure, and I hope to come back.
Thank you to our sponsor, VillageMD. We hope you will join us for future concise compliance conversations.